Samus, also known as the Lord of the Ruinstorm and the End and the Death, is an exceptionally powerful demon prince, one who is believed by some to be affiliated with Khorne, the chaos god of bloodshed and slaughter, though others claim that he is in fact the herald for an as of yet unborn deity known as the Dark King. Samus is one of the most notorious demon princes ever encountered by the Imperium of Man, gaining particular infamy during the events of the Horus Heresy. Not only did Samus slay dozens of Astartes upon the world of 6319 prior to the onset of the heresy itself, but he also appeared during the Battle for Calth, the burning of En Mat, and even the Siege of Terror itself. It was during the course of these various conflicts that Samus would face off against some of the Imperium's greatest heroes, including Remus Vantanos of the Ultramarines and Rogul Dawn of the Imperial Fists. But perhaps the Demon Prince's greatest nemesis would be that of the loyalist Lunar Wolf, Garviel Loken, with their respective destinies becoming thoroughly intertwined. Indeed, not only did Loken succeed in banishing Samus during both their initial encounter upon 6319, as well as their later confrontation upon the Phalanx during the course of the Solar War, but the two would also face off in one last violent battle upon the Vengeful Spirit, the very flagship of the traitorous Warmaster, Horus Lupercal. Despite the demon initially gaining the upper hand against Loken during their duel, the Lunar Wolf would ultimately prove victorious, channeling his latent psychic abilities to deliver a fatal blow that would destroy Samus's physical form, and subsequently banish him from the material realm. However, this will not prove to be the end of the Demon Prince, for during the events of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade in late M41, Samus would return to plague the Imperium once more, this time bonding his essence to a chaos cultist named Bazov, though Bazov himself would eventually be slain by Sergeant Owen McCall of the Tanith First and Only, casting the demon yet again back into the depths of the warp. Regardless, while Garviel Loken may have for a time succeeded in banishing Samus by destroying his physical form, it would be Loken's own death at the hands of the Dark Apostle Erebus that would give rise to the Demon Prince in the first place, with Samus's very nature as a warp-spawned entity allowing him to exist and have an influence on events that occurred prior to his creation. For once a demon has been brought into existence, it has, somewhat paradoxically, always existed. But the real question that needs to be asked, however, is thus: was it simply the act of Garviel Loken's murder that gave rise to Samus, or was Loken instead granted the gift of apotheosis, transforming him into a demon prince? Initially, it would seem unlikely for Samus to be, for lack of a better term, the ascended form of Garviel Loken, for it has been shown on multiple occasions that the very actions and emotions of mortals are more than enough to give rise to demonic entities. The most notable example in this regard is that of Draknien, an extraordinarily powerful demon that was created as a result of the first act of murder ever committed by members of the human race. Another example is shown with the Slaaneshi demon dubbed the Sapphire King, who was birthed by the cavalcade of conflicting emotions felt by Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands and Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children when the former was beheaded by the latter. As such, it's not unreasonable to assume that the act of Erebus murdering Garviel Loken, in addition to the various emotions that accompanied such an event, were the sole factors that led to the proverbial birth of Samus. However, there is one important detail regarding Samus that would appear to debunk this particular possibility: the fact that Samus himself is stated to be a demon prince, specifically a demon prince of the Ruinstorm. Unlike other demons, which are themselves true warp-spawned entities, demon princes by contrast are beings who were, at one point in time, mortal, having attained immortality by being blessed with the gift of demonhood by their patron deity. Despite being incredibly powerful creatures in their own right, their mortal origins will often result in demon princes being looked down upon and seen as inferior by both greater and exalted demons alike, though the mightiest and most powerful demon princes, such as Baklaher or any of the demon primarchs, will often prove exceptions to the rule. While Horus Heresy Book 8, Malevolence may at first glance appear to contradict the idea of Samus being a demon prince, due to the rules for Samus Unbound referring to him as a demon lord of the Ruinstorm, the flavor text that accompanies said rules does state unequivocally that he is in fact a demon prince. Now it should be noted that, according to the 2nd edition Chaos Codex, both mortals and demons alike can ascend to become demon princes, with the most notable in this regard being the Lord of Change known as Makachin, who was outright stated to have never been, at any point, mortal. However, the idea of Makachin being both a greater demon and a demon prince appears to have long since been retconned, with later sources, such as the Inquisition Encyclopedia, as well as both the 3rd and 5th edition Grey Knights codices, referring to the Lord of Change solely as a greater demon, with no mention whatsoever of him being a demon prince. The 8th edition Demons Codex even goes into great detail about how demon princes were once mortal, making no allusions to the notion of a, for want of a better term, pure demon being elevated to a demon prince. What also supports the idea of Garviel Loken having become Samus, albeit rather loosely, is that Samus's visage is highly reminiscent of a canid, such as a dog or a wolf. Seeing as how Loken was, for all intents and purposes, the last lunar wolf, outright refusing to refer to himself as a son of Horus, it would certainly be poetic irony for him to be transformed from a proverbial wolf into a true hound of chaos. While this may seem like circumstantial evidence at best, it should be noted that the demon prince Marbus, a former member of the Dark Angels Legion, would, upon his own ascension to demonhood, take on the appearance of a Calibanite lion, monstrous predators that were native to the Dark Angels' ancestral homeworld of Caliban. As such, it's not entirely unreasonable to assume that if Loken had also become a demon prince, his appearance would have become a twisted parody of the lunar wolf he once was. But if Samus is simply the demonic form of Garviel Loken, a man who not only boasted an unwavering loyalty to the Emperor, but also an intense hatred for his Primarch for succumbing to the temptations of chaos in the first place, then how is it even possible for him to have ascended to demonhood? The answer is that Loken may have simply been an unwilling recipient of such a gift. While such a notion may at first glance seem incredibly unlikely, if not utterly absurd, it is not without precedent. Following the outbreak of a demonic incursion upon the world of Zandaka II, as detailed within the novel Warden of the Blade, General Vendren Glass of the world's planetary defense force, a staunch and loyal defender of the Imperium in her own right, would eventually fall in battle against a horde of Slaaneshi demons, in where she would be crushed to death by falling masonry. However, due to the intense feelings of joy she experienced in fighting against the forces of chaos and the pleasure she took in gunning down her foes, Vendren Glass would, following her death, be rewarded by Slaanesh with the gift of apotheosis, transforming her into a demon prince, or rather demon princess, now known as Varangalax. With this in mind, it seems perfectly reasonable to assume that a similar fate could have befallen Garviel Loken, in where he was elevated to demonhood upon his death, in spite of his many years fighting against those in service to the ruinous powers. After all, Garviel Loken was known to harbour intense feelings of hostility and aggression, which were known to surface whenever he reverted to a Cerberus persona, an identity that he had cultivated following in the wake of the Istvan III purges, which Loken had only barely managed to survive, both physically and mentally. These wrathful emotions harboured by Loken could have in turn inadvertently drawn the attention of the Blood God, who, in addition to being a god of violence and murder, is also the very embodiment of rage and fury. As such, in a manner similar to how Vendren Glass accidentally gained the favour of Slaanesh, Garviel Loken, or more specifically his Cerberus persona, could have unwittingly pleased khorne enough for the god to bestow him with the gift of demonhood upon his death, with Cerberus becoming known thereafter as Samus. The only major problem with this particular hypothesis, however, is that if Samus is indeed the demonic form of Garviel Loken, or at least an aspect of Loken's psyche, then why didn't the Lord of the Ruinstorm ever taunt his past self with such information? The most likely possibility in this regard would be due to Samus wishing to ensure his own birth. After all, as mentioned earlier, Samus was brought into existence by the act of Garviel Loken being murdered at the hands of Erebus. If Loken ever learned of the exact circumstances that would lead to the creation of what is effectively his arch-nemesis, then the Lunar Wolf, out of sheer pragmatism more than anything else, could have taken his own life or otherwise ensured that he died in an altogether different manner in order to prevent Samus from being created in the first place, though this is purely speculation. But regardless as to whether he is the ascended form of Garviel Loken or not, one cannot help but wonder as to when Samus will return to once again unleash his wrath upon the Imperium. Such a day may arrive sooner than we think. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.